Hey, my friends, it's me, honey. Today, dropped my glasses. Today we're talking about the human body, and in a way that just may help you understand how cannabis fits in. We have several bodily networks with intercommunication between those systems that perform without us even thinking about it. Doctors understand the 11 known architectures or networks that govern your body. But what most doctors don't know in this day and age is what I'm talking about today. And you and your dog and cat were born with it. More right after the intro.
Welcome to Season 5 of the Cannabis Truth Podcast. Your host is Honey Smith-Walls, author of the new book, Healing Beyond High, Cannabis Truth, a gentle, practical guide for elders to learn cannabis fundamentals safely and effectively without overuse or overwhelm. In a world where the FDA has yet to stamp its approval on this ancient natural remedy, Honey Smith-Walls bridges the gap between Western healthcare norms, uplifting benefits and relief through gentle cannabis plant therapies. Join this 21st century cannabis shaman, uniquely positioned to assess the green intentions of medical, farming, and business industries in cannabis and uncover fascinating historical, political, scientific, and spiritual facets of the plant.
Thanks for joining us today. I want to talk to you about something important and newly discovered by science, and it's within your body. It's the 12th bodily system that determines, communicates, organizes, and orders all the other bodily systems that you have. And it's relative to cannabis. It's important for you to understand why cannabis works in your body on any or all of your issues. But before we go there, let me remind you that I'm not a doctor or a medical professional. I'm an educator in the cannabis industry, in a unique position to bring you cannabis facts as they are discovered and discussed because of the professional medical circles I run around in and the people I choose to bring to you. I vet these real human beings and their work before presenting them to you all so that you can feel safe in the truth of knowledge you're gaining, coming from the highest sources of medical professionals and other outstanding industry leaders of this era. I'm learning too. Cannabis is an extremely complex plant with hundreds of compounds in it, which is why it can help so many issues. And generally, it does so simultaneously, like a team of compounds. Yet we're only just now beginning the research phase of cannabis because of all the political shenanigans that have happened for almost the last 100 years. And it remains in its own imbroglio until we can untangle all of the politics. Cannabis works in your body because of your endocannabinoid system. That's a long word, but endo means, it's Latin, it means within. Cannabinoid, yes, after cannabis. And this system, we have, up until now, doctors thought we only had 11 bodily systems. But an Israeli scientist discovered the 12th bodily system in 1992. When cannabis research was still prohibited in the U.S. because of political interference with this ancient source of commerce in food, clothing, and medicine. Our scientists and doctors were forbidden to test or use the cannabis plant upon penalty. It was stripped from our American pharmacopoeia which lists all drug compounds, and they were forbidden to teach about cannabis in medical schools, again, upon pain of penalty. Further, doctors were penalized for prescribing it, taxed heavily, and finally threatened with license. When did we give the doctor's little black bag of medicinal knowledge away to politicians? Those same scientists are the ones who determined we have 11 body function systems that our lives rely on. You'll recognize learning about them in high school as I list them. Now you see what your doctors learned more extensively about in medical school. But what they have not learned about is the 12th system, only discovered in the 1990s and until just very recently also forbidden to research, and in some places, still forbidden. The 12th body system known to science is called the endocannabinoid OM. It is the master regulatory system that communicates with all these other 11 systems to bring them into harmony and homeostasis, which is a medical term for balance. Those master ECS, endocannabinoid system receptors, ECS, are in your brain, your blood, your central nervous system, and all throughout your skin, body, bones, and everywhere. Your body has this amazing system of receptors communicating within that bind perfectly with compounds in cannabis and will help you obtain relief from acute pain, inflammation, anxiety, depression, plus a whole host of other issues you suffer on this planet as a human. The cannabis plant is unique in that it grows hundreds of compounds, and those compounds are not only cannabinoids, but terpenes and alcohols and esters. Each one of those compounds have a job to perform for the plant, to protect that plant and support its growth. Over millions of years, this plant grew compounds for itself, for protection from the pain of living on this planet, protection from bugs, wind damage, sunburn, drought, rains, moles, mildew, heavy metals in the soil. But humans developing over time grew receptors inside the body that now recognize this plant's compounds and the relief it can offer. If you know that the terpene compounds in cannabis can be understood by smell, then perhaps you can see how receptors might develop within us to recognize and utilize those compounds. That's just an armchair theory, by the way. I'm not a scientist or a doctor, so, I'm just trying to figure it all out. But does it make sense to you now that our bodies perform better with plant medicine? See how it all connects? We already have an ancient built-in receptor system that cannabis compounds bind to perfectly. If you're wondering why cannabis can do so much for us, it's because of this receptor system running throughout our whole body. So if we have aches and pains in one area or another, or several at the same time, like a headache and a tummy ache and a bump or a bruise or a cut, cannabis will be able to manage all of those issues simultaneously. That's not what happens when you use prescriptions from synthetic compounds made by Big Pharma. Those synthetic compounds were created to target just one issue. And generally that one synthetic compound comes with many serious, negative, and even deadly side effects. Just watch those commercials and listen to that speeded up footnote. But that doesn't happen with cannabis. There has never been a death recorded on this planet from cannabis. It's even safer than peanuts. This is where I want to remind you that you've never heard about a death from cannabis on this planet. But That doesn't mean that it's right for everybody. Cannabis does have side effects, and there are some that you should be concerned about. For instance, if you're a heart patient taking prescriptions like warfarin, you want to be careful about cannabis because it too has blood thinning compounds in it. There are many cautionary tales about overuse of cannabis, especially in the young who are just trying to smoke their brains out on the highest percentage of THC that they can find. They don't have any education on the plant and just go by the by the more is better philosophy of medicating to get high. We were called hippies in my day, but today we just call those kids who don't know anything about cannabis smoking their brains out because they don't know any better and like the feeling of the high, and relief is just sort of an unobserved bonus to them. But those same kids don't worry about contamination like I do, or you should. It can do real damage, not the plant, the contamination. Here's where I say, I love the high, but I go for the relief. And at 70, I don't want to be high all day. I'm too busy living life, for the rest of my life, which may only be 20 or so years. I'm producing a podcast, writing a book, performing several live stages, just in this 1 month alone on my fall speaking tour, working with my business team, making time for daily meditation, living with a son and 2 grandkids, 5 dogs, 2 cats. I'm just too damn busy to sit in a couch lock from using the wrong kind of cannabis at that time of day. I managed to find out that overuse of cannabis can be quite problematic and even lead to discontinued use of cannabis because of its misery. What am I talking about? This is kind of a weird thing that I hear about in the professional medical circles that I run around in. And I need to remind you that I'm not a doctor. I'm not a professional, a medical professional. I'm a cannabis educator who has taken lots and lots of cannabis courses from medical scientists and doctors, and that's where I get my expertise. That and interviewing them on my podcast for the past 6 years, which makes me uniquely positioned to vet cannabis companies and products for you. It is difficult to vet a cannabis company if you don't understand the whole global picture. It's not difficult to understand, but it's difficult to accomplish because you have to have a really well-rounded knowledge of the entire cannabis industry in order to know that if that product is going to be safe or not. For you, farmers try to grow the product without any contamination in it, and that contamination can be perfectly normal, like molds or mildews or heavy metals, found in the soil. Herbicides, fungicides, and pesticides are not good in your cannabis either. Those are not natural. So you need to understand how the farmer is growing the plant, like indoors or outdoors, using what methods of bug and mold prevention, pesticides, testing the plant to make sure that there's no contamination in it. And then once dispensaries purchase it from the farmers, then it's up to that dispensary to make sure that the finished product is uncontaminated at the end of packaging. There are issues with dispensaries selling clean cannabis and practicing good manufacturing processes to keep you safe. That means proving that their packaged product is also safe as the original cannabis product they purchased to sell to you. Because if they're going to get the cannabis from the farmer and then do something to it afterwards, you still got another process to go through to check and make sure that that whole product will be perfectly safe for you to consume. For instance, remember all the vape pen scares out on the West Coast and maybe the East Coast too. Um, and the problems that came out originally. Those vape pens were coming from other countries and they were using inferior products and inferior steel inside the products, and it was flaking off into the cannabis compound. People were ingesting heavy metals, and then some of those vape pens, I hate to even say this out loud, it's so scary. Some of those vape pens even blew up in people's hands and faces. You just can't unhear that when you handle a vape pen now. So they quickly began making sure that vape pens were being used in the U.S., were not going to blow up in your hand or face. That meant checking sources, making sure products were 100% safe, and proving it by a third-party lab test for everybody to see that they were up to our American standards, at the very least.
Well, hello, I'm Dr. Philip Blair, and I want to introduce you to Honey Smith Walls. And she's a real strong advocate and educator about cannabis. And she recently had an experience with beta-caryophyllene.
Pain demands your attention. And that's about all you can think about when it's really, severe pain.
So what did it relieve?
Well, I noticed the neuropathy in my hands goes at sort of a slant, like this. And my fingers just get so frozen cold, they'll turn blue, or right now they're really hot. And I just noticed that lifting up. Also, I couldn't make a fist with my hand. Look at that. Look at that. And hello, it made me grateful. Oh.
Friends, I've been talking about cannabis contamination for almost 6 years because of what it did to me. It made me so sick, it nearly killed me. But it didn't. Obviously, I'm here. And I'm here because of that incident. Because I finally realized what was happening and why. And then came this serendipitous moment. I was 6 years into an autoimmune disease called myalgic encephalomyelitis. That's what CNN used to smirk about as they would present it on the 6 o'clock news. They laughingly used to call it chronic fatigue. And I say it that way because when I was a kid, I was, listening to the news. It wasn't just CNN. It was all the major networks talking about chronic fatigue, and they'd say it with a smirk, as though the problem were not real, as though it had been just a made-up syndrome, as though they just didn't believe that there was a disease called chronic fatigue, but they didn't realize what it does to a person. And I do. My husband and I were out sailing on our boat for several years in the Caribbean. It's called Living Aboard, and wow, was it a fantastic adventure. We sailed in that area in the Caribbean for almost 5 years in a fleet of about 50 other private boats. And so we were in a community, living on the water, sailing from island to island, just having a blast. And then I got sick. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. I just didn't have the energy to lift a finger anymore. It was a devastating blow to my energy, and it soon took me over. It consumed my mind with fear because I didn't know if I was ever going to feel better again. You just don't feel like there's ever any energy coming back into your body. You don't feel like you can feed yourself, much less get up and go to the bathroom or do anything around the house, like chores or anything. And so you begin doing this doctor dance. And they can't figure it out either, not even by your blood tests. And after many, many doctors and many, many years, they eventually decide you've got this syndrome because you're chronically fatigued. And then they tell you something about the Epstein-Barr issue in your blood. And then they give you all kinds of antidepressants and antifungals and antibiotics and B12 shots. None of those work. But then eventually, the episode of fatigue begins to lift, if you're lucky. But it may take weeks before you feel the energy of life and want to get up and move your body. It's frightening as hell not to have any energy and to feel like you're falling into death slowly, especially if you don't have your mind right around death. This is sort of where I want to go into the spirit of cannabis and talk about the relief people can find for their spirit. Using cannabis is like opening a door into peace. Cannabis can calm your heart and your fears, and it can help you forgive. It can help you tolerate those around you. It can help you understand. It can help you create. It can help you be a better, loving human. If we as humans live 90% of the time thinking of the past or worrying about our future, then I doubt we are being efficient in creating our own present happiness. Pardon me. I want control over my own future. I want to create my own future. I want the things that I want, and I don't want to be worried about it. I don't want to be anxious over my future. I want to be in control. And cannabis allows me the freedom of mind over fear, mind over anxiety, mind over depression, and mind over negative looping thoughts and memories. I have complete freedom of my own mind now and can use it as I choose. I no longer have to let my thoughts drag me around by my emotions. Cannabis is an introspective tool for humanity, and that's just one way to use cannabis. The industrial uses for cannabis are absolutely limitless, from clothing to paper to building roads, cars, and airplanes with it. It filters water. It heals the sick. It is a whole food, meaning that we could literally subsist on it if we had to, just eating cannabis alone, just the seeds and nothing else if we had to. I feel the pressure of the political situation happening in the U.S. right now, and part of it is the fight for cannabis, for the freedom of cannabis. Throughout this country, there will be several states that are switching from medical marijuana to adult use, or what they call recreational. Now, Florida, for instance, is one of those. I'm saddened to hear it because I know, after moving up to Michigan from Florida, that the Michigan medical marijuana program was 400,000 strong when it began a few years back, and it has dwindled down to 30,000, including me, ever since recreational or adult use marijuana came in. People did not understand that education about cannabis would dwindle with the medical program you see, because the recreational companies who provide high THC products for you don't give a shit about your medical problems. They will not accept any responsibility for you. You as a person, as a patient. They don't want to claim you as a patient or claim any responsibility for your illnesses. They don't claim to sell medicine. They just claim to sell the high. But cannabis is medicine, and it can get you high, just like tons of those other prescriptive meds that you take. And yet, if you don't take too much, You won't get high with those prescriptive medications. You see the same thing going on here? If you use the right kind of cannabis, you don't have to get high. If you use it correctly and use the alchemy of cannabis correctly, you can use THC all you want and never have to get high, but you can take advantage of the power of the medicine in THC. Those dispensaries who are selling high THC products only, they just are selling high THC. That's what they do. They've taken the cannabis plant and put it in a pretty shiny foil package and given it ridiculous names that are so terrible and disrespectful to women, like pink pussy and unicorn dicks or whatever they're calling it. It's just disgusting. And I cannot and refuse to discuss those kind of products with cannabis patients who are looking to find safe and effective relief by using cannabis medicine. I won't send them to a dispensary like that. I'll try to help them find a better source, because they don't care that you don't know anything about that product and that, you know, you're about to ingest something that could potentially give you an adverse reaction to cannabis by overusing THC. And that means, you know, it could be high anxiety. You could have feelings of fear and heart palpitations. You could feel like you're frozen in time. You could be having a bad ride on cannabis. And so it wouldn't hurt you, but that doesn't mean that it's not negative. You know, again, never a death by cannabis on the planet. But it does have some negative effects for some people. So you must learn how to use cannabis properly and how to, you know, work the alchemy for yourself and your own conditions. As I was saying, those recreational dispensaries just don't care about your medical issues. And that's where people lose out when they go recreational over medical. And yeah, so you say, so cannabis is too complicated for the general public to understand? And cannabis is an incredibly complex plant with hundreds of compounds in it, each having their own medicinal value and profile, like CBD, cannabidiol. I'm sure you've heard of CBD. It's an anti-inflammatory cannabis compound, but it has several other medicinal profiles as well. CBD, or cannabidiol, is an anti-inflammatory, and THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, is famous for getting you high, but it's also a tremendous painkiller. CBD will quell anxiety, and THC might give you some anxiety if you overuse it. So those are just a couple of things about the two major compounds in cannabis. But remember, I just told you that there are hundreds of compounds in cannabis, and each one of those compounds will do something medicinal for you, and all of those compounds already love each other and work in harmony. They're already a team. They work together synergistically, like a football team in your body. And so if you have an IBS sort of an issue, that's irritable bowel syndrome, the same kind of syndrome like chronic fatigue that doctors cannot find a real source of, and there's lots of terrible effects from it, all in different areas of your body. Irritable bowel syndrome is a terrible kind of suffering that cannabis can relieve with its gentle blast of compounds that work together inside your body to relieve inflammation and pain. Doctors all around the globe will tell you that inflammation is at the heart of all disease. And the compounds in cannabis are incredibly anti-inflammatory. Our politicians are doing some pretty stupid things. One of them out in California right now is trying to make manufacturers create hemp without THC. I just want to remind you that hemp and marijuana are the same plant. They're just grown differently, and one of them they both have all the hundreds of compounds in it. But the two major compounds that both grow in marijuana and hemp are CBD and THC. And marijuana grows more THC. Hemp grows more CBD. But they both have both compounds and all the other hundreds of compounds in cannabis. So, like I said, there's a politician out in California right now, I'm really ashamed of him, who is trying to make manufacturers create hemp without THC in it. Now, he seemingly has good intentions, but he obviously has not studied the plant enough to know the harm that he's doing. Because those hemp products are saving the lives of so many people. That politician is trying to get rid of THC in hemp because of all of the illicit products that have been made in garage labs across the United States. They're synthetic, and they have street names like Delta 10, Delta 8, and THCO. There's little chance that these products are uncontaminated, because they're all made in laboratories and they're being sold as a secondary or alternative way to get high. That's not what I want or need, and I don't want the kids continuing to abuse this plant by finding an alternative that's currently legal, because the legislators don't understand how any of it's being made. They haven't studied cannabis. That's what I'm talking about. You know, we've got to get the legislators out of the little out of the little black bags of doctors. Got to. So, like I said, there's little chance that these products are uncontaminated, and they are sold in ultra high percentage of psychoactive compounds. So when you concentrate cannabis, and this is the other nasty part of buying those kind of illicit products, when you concentrate cannabis, you're also concentrating the toxins and the contamination in cannabis. So when these kids go out and buy these contaminated products and then way overconsume, their bodies tend to reject it after a while, and they get sick from it. God, I don't like talking about this either, but I'm gonna, I guess. Here it comes. This does not happen often, but it's been seen enough by emergency room doctors to know that it's a rising issue. People who continually overconsume THC for long periods of time, like years, might suffer a condition called cannabis hyperemesis, and it mostly affects younger people who have no cannabis education and completely overuse high THC cannabis products constantly. That's not the same thing as a cannabis patient who uses the plant mindfully as medicine to quell their issues and diseases. Doses are known, and overconsumption is avoided by microdosing cannabis. With hyperemesis, users start getting sick, feeling nauseated, throwing up, and then they can't stop throwing up. And the only thing that seems to give them any relief is a hot shower. A really, really, really hot shower. Hot water running over their body. That's a sensory thing. Do you see how abusing cannabis created a weird body situation? Like, the endocannabinoid receptors in that body are now rejecting cannabis. I just want to tell you something I learned from those scientists too, and this all makes sense now that I'm thinking about it. When you overuse cannabis, I heard one of the scientists say your receptors close up and start, going into your body, receding into your body, so that the cannabinoids can't even get to them anymore. And that is a rejection of cannabis. So it's kind of clicking for me right here, right now. Anyway, it's frightening for the person going through it, and disappointing too, because they love using cannabis for the feelies, but soon realize it's the cannabis that's making them throw up. And that means that they've way overconsumed contaminated products too. And their bodies are just rejecting. So that's not really a problem in the medical cannabis world. That's a problem in the recreational world of cannabis. Anyway, political legislation is rolling under our feet. Woo! And it's very hard to find a product that's going to be here 6 months later. How about 6 weeks later? How about 6 days later? Yeah, it's that inconsistent. If you're in the medical cannabis arena, if you have access to medical cannabis, then you're in a much better position than the recreational people are, because you're getting education with your medication. I know that because I lived in Florida, where they only had a medical marijuana program at the time, and they did not wrap my medicine in pretty packaging and give it goofy names and skip the lab test information. No, I knew exactly what was in that cannabis product that I was buying and the compounds that I was ingesting, to the best of our scientific abilities at that time. You see, our politics have just only recently released the ability to research cannabis. It wasn't allowed to study. It wasn't. People were not allowed to study cannabis, even in the medical industry, because politics said they couldn't. Because politics named it a Schedule I compound, even though politicians didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. I can assure you that politicians don't go to cannabis school, but they should, because cannabis is changing our world, like it or not, and in a very good way. We are connected to cannabis as humans because of this ancient receptor system that we have. And that ancient receptor system will always connect us to cannabis, and to allow our politicians the capability of preventing us from using cannabis while they still do not understand the mechanisms of the plant, nor the medicinal value to humanity, is completely detrimental to our society. Cannabis must be freed from the politicians. It is the simple fix for humanity that we need to uplift our bodies, our minds, and our hearts. It is the key to keeping water safe to drink. It is the key to having a healthy body in both animals and humans. It is the key to new commerce. It is the key to a creative future, and it is the key to peace of mind. I want to thank you for joining us today. It's difficult to wrap your head around all of this political shenanigans, the complexity of cannabis, and how to use it for yourself. But as I tell everybody I meet, if you can put butter and syrup on a pancake, you can do cannabis alchemy. It's that easy. And I'm here to help you. Do some research on your endocannabinoid system, ECS for short. It will help you understand why cannabis works so well in your body. It will help you get over the stigma that cannabis is bad for you, because it's not. That was a huge lie propagated by politicians. And so once you find out the truth about cannabis and its history, you begin to see that it was used for so much longer on this planet as a medicine, and that it was prohibited for the past 100 years. Cannabis has always been on this planet, and humans have always farmed it. I want to live with cannabis again. I don't want to wipe my ass from a tree anymore that has to grow for 50 years before they cut it down. Cannabis, bamboo, mushrooms, all of those plants can make paper, clothing, food, medicine. I'm not kidding you. We've got a lot to learn about plants on the planet and how we can take advantage of them. You see, we've just been involved in our own American medical philosophy of taking one synthetic prescriptive medication that targets one issue. We can do a whole lot better than that, though, friends. I hope you'll do your own research and investigation. Go to ChatGPT and just ask about cannabis and how it can help our body, our minds, our souls. Been here long enough with you today. I'm so glad to see you, though. Thank you for coming and learning about what cannabis can do to help you. I'm giving you all lots of love and encouragement. Oh, hey, I'm in the middle of my fall speaking tour. If you want to hear me on stage live talking about the spirit of cannabis, I'd love for you to join me. Find me on Facebook. Go to the Cannabis Truth podcast page, or just find me at Honey Smith Walls on Facebook. I'm talking about it every day. And so I hope to see you there. Oh, I've also got another gift for you. If you'd like to see what a cannabis medicine cabinet might look like, for all those bumps and bruises and aches and pains that do not require a doctor dance, just go to healingbeyondhigh.com and grab my free little gift. It's just a PDF printout, but it will show you what a good medicine cabinet looks like that's got green plant therapy in it for all those typical bumps and bruises. La, 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 la. I just said it again, that you don't need a doctor dance for. I hope you'll take advantage of this free gift. And yeah, it's named after my new book coming out, Healing Beyond High, Cannabis Truth. See you next week. Sending love.
You've been listening to another Cannabis Truth podcast with 21st century cannabis shaman Honey Smith Walls. It is important to use verifiably safe products and look out for yourself while we're in this wild, wild west of cannabis right now. Ask for help. It can get complicated. If you need serious medical attention, please consult one of the specialists at cannabisclinicians.org. They will get you to the right person and therapy for your issues. Tune in here for weekly foundational knowledge and learn to determine the best choices and cannabis strategies for your issues. But please be advised that shamans are not doctors or scientists. You'll find those at cannabisclinicians.org. Unless otherwise proven by a reputable third-party lab test, please regard all street weed as contaminated. It may do grave harm to a patient with a delicate immune system who already has inflammatory issues like arthritis, IBS, fibromyalgia, or worse. Thank you for your time today.